you know I do, to make it through the times we had. I see it now, I see it now. Real love, now I'll break through to show to you that I'm more good than I am bad. I'll work it out, I'll work it out. And I'll be somewhere that you need me, and I'll be holding my breath, waiting for you to show. Afraid to say real love, now I see you, and I'll make it through to find a life that we once had. I see it now, I feel it now. Real love, now I see you, yeah, you know I do, to make it through the times we had. I see it now, I see it now. Real love, now I'll break through to show to you that I'm more good than I am bad. I'll work it out, I'll work it out. And I'll be somewhere that you need me, and I'll be holding my breath, waiting for you to show.
Some days there's no one else who loves me like you used to. Some days I'm not myself, there's no one I can turn to. All the feelings that we shared are in the past. Your relationships are never meant to last.
What's up, guys? How's everybody doing? Welcome to the BlockRoots YouTube channel. Just give everyone a moment to get situated, do a little sound check. Hear me in the background drinking my, what do we have today? Health Aid Kombucha Bubbly Probiotic Tea, and this flavor is Pink Lady Apple. What's going on, everybody? All right, Captain Youth, Cornholio, JE, what's up? JT, Crypto Sam, Chief Catan, what's up? What's up? What's up? Again, going to give everyone a minute or two. See if we get a decent amount of people in here. Let me reshare the link. Ooh, Qcoin token looking absolutely ridiculous since my post yesterday. So we're going to go over that in a second. 1 minute and we will get it going. Live now. Hop in and ask some. And let's throw up some charts. All right. What's going on? Rodero, Bippin. Okay. Okay. That should be good. Get off of Twitter. Sound is very tingy, hollow. Sound okay for everybody else? How's the sound for everybody else? I want to just make sure that you can hear me clearly, right? Responder 0. What's up, bud? I said responder 0. I was still thinking about my last statement. Logan, what's up, buddy? Sound is good. Once we have the green light on the sound, we'll take a look at the charts. Take a look at some things that are setting up. Okay, so we'll go to the charts really quickly. Sound is good. Okay, sound is good. So let's take a look at the charts. All right, let's do this switcheroo. So what did I say about KuCoin? So this was my post yesterday. And just before we get into it, on behalf of myself and my partner Josh Rager, I want to thank you guys for tuning in to the BlockRoots YouTube channel. Again, what we try to do is provide non-sensational crypto market analysis and updates. Right. So myself being primarily a technical trader, Josh being a trader as well. We think that it's important for YouTube to have non-sensational accounts that are here as an educational resource because there's a lot of garbage on YouTube. All right, so that's why you won't see us with the big faces on our thumbnails trying to gain attention off of that. We try to have quality information in our live streams. Okay, not only that, just as a reminder, everything you hear in this live stream, everything that I go over is strictly my opinions, right? This is not to be misconstrued or construed as financial advice whatsoever. These are how I trade, what I'm looking at, what my opinions are. All right, so again, none of this is to be taken as financial advice. This is strictly for entertainment purposes only. As a reminder, this stream is sponsored by, and our partners are, Phemex. So we've been partners with Phemex now for over a year. They are the fastest crypto exchange. They offer feeless spot trading. They offer futures trading, and they also now offer a yield generating program for USDT. So you're going to make more in these yield generating programs in crypto than you would in your traditional savings account. All right, so if you use the link below, as you can see, it says at the bottom where it says include paid promotion, right? Obviously, we're partners with them. We have to list that. But you can see Phemex.trade, and that'll give you access to whatever kind of promotional feature that they are running. Okay, so let's look at KuCoin really quickly. Or first things first, I'll go over sort of the idea, behind this setup, not just from a technical standpoint, but if you look at for the last 3 months, so for the last quarter, so we'll just go to sector performance. This is on Messari. All right, I'm not shilling Messari. I don't work for Messari. I don't get anything for this. I just really like the Messari platform, and I was a Delphi institutional member, and I'm canceling that to join as a Messari enterprise member. So if we look at the last 3 months performance by sector, we could see that sitting atop the leaderboard is centralized exchanges. Okay, so it's been known for some time now that Coinbase is going public. Okay, so they have their direct listing coming up. They're going public, and not only are they going public, and this is exciting for crypto because obviously Coinbase is something that we're all familiar with. It's representative of the crypto market as a whole. I think for a lot of traditional participants, this will be used as sort of a vehicle for proxy to represent the crypto market, right? Them to get some type of exposure through traditional equity markets, instead of going through GBTC or some other stock that is heavily correlated to crypto. Think about Riot Blockchain. Go all the way back to 2017, 2018. Think about Long Island Blockchain Company. That's a joke. But not only are they related to crypto, but they are all over the front page news now. If you're on CNBC, if you're anyone in Wall Street, you have to pay attention now because they've come in far excess of expectations. Okay, with revenue, with how many users, how much growth they've experienced. All right, so at 56 million users, this is around a sixth or a seventh of the total PayPal user base. Now, what this has, since again, this has been known for a really long time. So I said months ago, a bunch of us were saying, this is not something that I was just saying. What's going on, Keld? What's going on, Ross? That this was going to cause a repricing across the board by crypto exchanges. So crypto exchanges were going to be repriced, right? Because it's essentially a relative value play on the Coinbase listing. And you would see an appreciation in any crypto exchange token. So as we could see BNB for Binance, as we can see FTT for FTX, and then KuCoin, which is KuCoin's token, KCS. It's a higher beta exchange token. So again, I would expect it to be less stable, more volatile, but more upside, right? But also more downside. Okay, so FTX is definitely, if Coinbase is receiving such a valuation, I could assume that you know, FTX would be up there if it was going for, you know, if it was trying to aim for a public listing, right? Or if it was going to be a publicly traded company. So we're seeing a repricing across the board in these exchange tokens now that Coinbase has been officially priced. Okay, and you know, FTX, FTT, right? BNB, these have put in massive moves the last 3 months. So the entire quarter has been really most of the performance, and the first place spot has gone to these centralized exchanges. So has gone to these exchange tokens. So the idea with, I think, a lot of things right now, or rather, I think that the better play right now is anything that is heavily correlated to these exchange tokens and any exchange tokens that exist, period. So yesterday I shared this chart and I said KuCoin's very own KCS benefit from being a higher beta exchange token. Okay, and I said that the blue area, right, post breakout of this high, so let me just pull up my drawing tool because I accidentally turned my computer off before I went to go unplug my microphone. This level right here, okay, being the all-time high break, all right, and then this pocket between the 382 and the 618 for a Fibonacci retracement, this being the zone to look for a pullback to really find footing within. And after a big move, right, if the market is moving very quickly, sometimes you'll see just a 382 tested, but the 618 to the 5 level, right, the halfway point, generally that's a good area to expect a response, okay? And sure enough, this is what we've seen today. So the market actually came specifically right. I didn't change this chart whatsoever. It came back to the T to this 618 level, so to A50, right? And again, just to reiterate and point this out, this has not changed, right? This has been the same exact Fibonacci from yesterday that I shared. All right, so I think obviously this move is in the rear view now, but I think one of the better things to do moving forward is to, again, as I mentioned this on Twitter, identify what is heavily correlated with these exchange tokens. So we know that FTT is just one of many SAM coins, right? This is FTX's exchange token, but things like SRM, things like SOL, okay, things like Ray, these have been heavily correlated to the performance of FTT. So I would expect that there is sort of a leader and laggard play that's going to exist between these exchange tokens, and whether it's on FTX and it's a SAM token, or whether it's on Binance and it's any token that's been heavily correlated with BNB. I would expect that relationship to continue to develop and to continue to persist. And I would say that, you know, if something has been heavily correlated to one of these pairs in the past, that expect it moving forward to be a good play off of these trades as well. Meaning, if you see that, you know, XYZ coin has been correlated to FTT for the last 3 months and it's been extremely correlated, and you see a good setup developing and it's beginning to follow a little bit, maybe at that point you do have sort of a laggard play where the play has not transpired yet, but it is going to develop. Okay, so that aside, KuCoin is obviously done. That move has been put in. Let's take a look at BTC. All right, so first things first, BTC, again, hello to everybody. Just go back to the chat, see if anyone is new. Okay, still hear you, just deeper bass tones, I guess. Okay, Ross, Keld, Hannibal, what's up, pal? All right, so let's take a look at BTC. We have a lot of activity into this low recently. So if we were to look at something like a 30-second chart, you'd see there's a ton of back and forth going on right now on the spot market, specifically between buyers and sellers right around this 56,650 level. So we'll see how this resolves, but we do have some key levels with regards to the higher time frame that I think are worth focusing on. So if we look at the weekly, we'll just take some of these levels off first. If we look at the weekly, you know, it's been the case that in the last month, from a closing standpoint, we've been within what is around a 5-6% range. So that's very tight, right? And that's just from a closing standpoint. If we look at ultimately the weekly range, you know, this week of the 22nd, it's kind of an outlier, but if we look at the weekly range as a whole and even omit that, we're looking at anywhere between, you know, the total range is probably about 20% in the last month. Oh, wait. Oh, no, it's anchored. Excuse me. So total range is probably around 20%, but we've spent the majority of time around that 5 to 10% range. So if we're looking at this, or we're looking at something like a Bollinger Band, or we're looking at, you know, volatility as a whole, it's been very clear that things are really coming to a point. And, you know, when you have a compression of volatility, you know, such as this, that's a white line will not do for this display. You have this compression of volatility, and however you want to draw it, right? It's just the idea is that since the market is sort of bottlenecking, once we do pick a direction and we do see an increase in volume get behind that move, we could expect some trend continuation off of that. So when the market chooses either, I would say a break, I think that the break to the high has a little bit more follow through, but when we choose either a break through 60, or I would say a break of around what is now right at these lows, so we're looking at right around 55.5. I wouldn't fade that move. So if we get a break above 60, I wouldn't fade that. I wouldn't expect it to really stop at the all-time high. And if we do get a move below 55.5, I think that we're probably coming back down around this 54 to 53 200 level, and that's a naked point of control right there. So if you see the move through those levels, my opinion is that I wouldn't go ahead and try to fade it. So we've seen that many times before in this week and the past couple of weeks that, again, this 60K level has been the turning point. So I'll zoom out because otherwise we're not going to see these levels on. So we see that the highest of the last week, right, is at 60.55, and the low of the prior week, so we're still within a prior week's range, is around 54.9. So 55, 60, pretty much 60K. And if these levels break, I think that you could expect some follow through back down to 53.3 initially. And I think if 60K breaks, I don't want to say that you're just going to the all-time high. I think that that's a reasonable target to expect. So right around, initially the highest daily close right around 61.25, 61.2. But I think that this would probably have some legs after that point. We are still within a range, right? We're still within a range. Again, very tight on the weekly, which the benefit of having something this tight on the weekly, where you're within last week's structure, so we have an inside week, and we've been that way for the last month, is that when, again, you do have a high volatility, high volume breakthrough this level, either to the upside or to the downside, that you're probably going to see some continuation. I don't think there's any cause to really be concerned with the higher time frame trend. So we'll just take these off and take the session volume off real quick to make this point. I don't think that there's really any cause for concern unless we lose. I would say in the meantime, if we lost this diagonal, right, let's say that we come down a little bit more, you might find support at this diagonal. But I would say as long as we hold this higher low here, and we're maintaining a series of higher lows, then I'm not really worried. So this higher low level, if we just zoom out a little bit of a higher resolution setting, you can see that this area right around 51, 52 has been a pretty pivotal point within market structure. And again, it is the one and then the second higher low within this. So we haven't made, we've made a marginally higher high. This looks like it is, sort of one of those scary looking rounded highs. But if we go back, this rounded top, right? Some people are going to be sharing something like this, where it's a inverse Adam and Eve structure, where you have a high volatility move into the high and then a rounded failure at that high before even being able to retake it. Right, similar to at lows, you look for something like this. If we look back in Bitcoin's history, more recently though, around 20K, it was sort of the same thing, where you had a marginally higher high, you still have a higher low that was made, and then the market actually did roll a little bit more, right? So there was this rounded structure, and the market didn't go on to puke, even though it actually looked like it might have been setting up to do that. So I'm wondering if we're getting a little bit too, if some of us are getting a little bit too bearish. I am getting a little bit concerned, obviously, when there's a slight drop off in momentum after such a large move that we've had. But again, there's many times when you can look at charts, and there's many periods where there appears to be a drop off in momentum, and it's just a drop off in activity, and it's a longer consolidation before the next leg up. And if this structure is intact on the weekly time frame still, we have the weekly level right now. The highest weekly level is right around 59.35, 59.4 area. This higher low in the weekly is around 45. No change to that on the weekly, and I would say that the structure clearly is still intact. Right? It's not looking to shape up as maybe best as it could. Right? in the best case scenario, you would just have a market that is continually putting in these straight drives upward. But again, after such a long sustained move, you would expect a long consolidation as well. So if we break 52, that weekly level is my target. So right around 40. So let's say we break 52, 51 on high volume, right? We don't see any immediate significant response off of this level, then yeah, I would start looking down at this weekly level right around 45. And just as a reminder, you know, we've spent the majority of our time in the top side of this structure, right, for the last 2 weeks. So these are the last 2 weeks, right, within this range. But if we zoom out, you know, it still qualifies as a larger, higher time frame range, all the way back down to 45. Obviously, you don't want to start losing lows, and then, you know, it's going to be tough to really maintain a bullish bias as you're, you know, dumping towards 45. But weekly structure is weekly structure, and I think a lot of us do sort of hold that higher time frame consideration. Does anyone have any questions about the higher time frame? You know, in terms of some important trending tools, the higher time frame moving average, we still haven't come back to this 20 period moving average on the weekly. You know, in previous bull markets, we had done that. We're spending a good amount of time around it on the daily. So just what you would expect in sort of choppy ranging conditions. Nothing that, again, is too much cause for concern. As I said, you know, I pulled up the Bollinger Bands. I don't really use these myself. You could see this kind of drop off in volatility in ATR and just in price action alone. But you could see that the last time that we were this tight is actually back at this period where it was the last time we also had this sort of rounding structure. So really steep drop off in volatility. And I think that, again, this just adds more to the idea that if now we do break to the upside and start pushing against the top side of this channel and see an expansion, that is the play to go with. Just expect to be chopped up if you're trying to get pre-positioned for that right now. I think that, honestly, I would rather get involved on a high volatility break above 60 than consistently try to buy the dip right now, right? But to each their own. So does all of this, how does all of this jive with the higher time frame, everyone's higher time frame opinion? Are we bullish? Are we bearish? I'm going to tap into the wisdom of the crowd right now. We'll put on some of the intraday levels. So how are we feeling as far as the higher time frame? I think it's still intact. I think that, you know, many times before we've seen this, it looks like it should be something that, you know, it's very easy to connect the drop off of momentum with the final drop off of momentum. The idea of that being the case. And for those of you that are, when I say a drop off in realized volatility and implied volatility, you know, we share this platform quite frequently. I love these guys. I think they built an incredible platform. They have an awesome YouTube channel as well if you want to learn all of this stuff for free. But look at implied volatility right now. So if anything, expectations are that volatility still remains flat. And volatility right now is the lowest that it's been in terms of implied volatility, is the lowest it's been since Q4 of 2020. And that is Genesis vol. So huge ascending triangle forming. Yeah, I think that until that changes, that is the most obvious thing to say right now, right? That this is a long consolidation, right? A long ascending triangle forming after a very long trend. And as long as it's making higher lows, you know, it's making marginally higher highs, right? But as long as it's making higher lows and we don't start sort of invoking any fear in the market by losing any one of these lows, you know, until, like the saying goes, if nothing changes, nothing changes, right? So if today's close is below yesterday's, we drop a lot. I'm not 100% certain of that logic. I don't want to say we drop a lot. It's easy to assume much more of a follow through in a bull market to the upside than it is to the downside. So sorry if you hear banging, they're changing the siding right now of the house. Let's see. Okay. Is the lack of correlation from BTC to legacy markets anything to be concerned about? No, not necessarily. Legacy markets are moving up. Bitcoin has moved up for quite some time before legacy market even put in its move over 4K. So I don't think that I would be concerned about that whatsoever. And if we look at something like even just the S&P right now, we look at the ES, the NQ, all of them right now making moves upward. So If we look at the ES, holding above 4K nicely. The S&P looks like after lunch, the latter portion of the day, I would just expect this to continue to range. I wouldn't expect any major moves, but no immediate sell-off, no obvious effort by any kind of entity or larger entities to really push this. So I don't want to focus too much on that. Dollar also having some trouble. I think when these narratives spin up, they're very interesting, but Bitcoin, it can remain uncorrelated and move on its own, right, as we've seen many times when it chooses. The only time I get worried about correlation really being an issue is if there's any kind of major downside in traditional markets where liquidity is an issue. So I wouldn't. I don't expect that anytime soon. So. So yeah, BTC on the higher time frame looks good. It just looks like it's slowing down, right? That's what happens in a trend. I think you get too used to things moving really rapidly. If we look on the lower time frames, right? Again, we've been within a really tight range. We've had a lot of value overlap the last couple of weeks. Okay, so again, the change from ranging. Let me change the ink really quickly. So the change from trending to ranging conditions, more rotational conditions, we have more of this value overlap. So we can see the value areas. The market is very much accepted in this area. So if you've been accepted within a range for the last 2 weeks, you certainly want to see that when you make a move outside of that range, that buyers immediately bid this up, right? Buyers immediately bid this up. So far, we have a decent tail. And another thing that I really like is on the lower time frames, you can see that this is, well, on the higher time frames too, you see that these lows are being very heavily sold. So what we're looking at is trend, overlap, trending behavior. We've taken out these lows right now. We're spending a good amount of activity down here. Sellers are really exerting themselves. And if we're now able to get back above, I would say the lows of this structure before this break. So I think that as long as we're starting to close back above this, 57 would be great. I said this morning 56.3 for a bigger move, and we already got a nice move out of that. But if we are able to close back above, what is basically the underside of this structure, today's low, yesterday's low would be phenomenal. But if we're able to get back within what is really, right around, one sec, right around this 57 level, then I think that this is probably just your deviation again, right? And then we could look for another playback up to these highs. This just sets up a trap, right? You have the market that's been confined for, I always say the market. You have a situation where BTC has been more or less range bound, besides some intraday moves, some lower time frame trends, but more or less range bound for the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days, right? The final trending day into this high, and then you have pretty much just a week straight of ranging behavior. So what you want to see is ultimately that if you're going to look for a long at this point, if you didn't already take that long earlier this morning, you want to see that the market's able to gain acceptance back within this daily level. And I like to look at the previous daily levels, right, for some sort of gauge to go off of, right, levels to take to get involved in. So right now, below yesterday's low, right? So this is how trending behavior begins, right? When you have a shift in value. Okay, so the good thing is, though we have a good amount of volume into this low, the value area hasn't exactly followed through nearly as much. So we're seeing the value is still pretty much more closer. I was about to say more closer. Closer to the range, right? Still back within the range. We had a good amount of volume below this low, but we're not really seeing what you would expect in a really strong trending move as it's beginning, which is a transition of the point of control, for example, right here, which is up here, lower down within the structure to show us that, hey, there's a lot more interest in selling this, right, than what we're seeing in this trap down here. There's no real transition yet. So that's something that I think is a positive. And again, another thing though is when you go from range expansion from prior days. So we had kind of a period of, it wasn't an inside day, but these were very tight last 2 days, right? This structure as a whole is very tight. So what we would really want to see is, if we're going to be bullish, I think, and not bullish on the higher time frames, but in terms of an intraday play and some more long setups, now that this one is kind of again has taken place, above us at least. I would rather see that, excuse me, that we're back within, at least back within yesterday's range. So above yesterday's low, which is around 57,333. And then I think you get a playback to that point of control, which is, just put this back on. Ooh, so actually this is, oh, this is on Coinbase, that's why. So, well, there actually is a difference now. So, excuse me, because I was looking at, forgetting this is on Bybit. So Bybit, the volume hasn't followed through as much. Coinbase, it actually has. So if anything, it's still a decent setup, right? There's not major cause to be concerned of. There's no major cause for concern. It just happens to be that the way that this is sitting now, yeah, sellers are clearly in control. I would want to see that we're back above this point of control, right? Back above this point of control. I think if you get back above this point of control, and actually I'm glad I put this on, because if we're back above this point of control now and you have this sort of W, failure swing towards this low already right here, and we're back above 57, you get a play back up to 57.33. So you have this little intraday play. If you're back within yesterday's range, right, you're looking for a move back up to yesterday's close, all right, which is today's open right around 58. Let's see, does anyone have any questions? So on the spot market, rather on spot in terms of spot's profile, we are seeing the beginning of how, rather this is how a trend begins, right? You have value overlap the last couple of days, right? Value overlap. So we're looking at the value areas for the last 4 days, and now we have a pretty strong high conviction move through the lows. It has yet to really claim those lows again. So, we're staying optimistic, but it's still through the lows. You've had a transition in value now. So first transition in value, right, of the last 4 days, rather the last, I think this is, if we zoom out, it's the ugliest one in the last week, because the volume again is a little bit more forceful to the downside versus most of it still being up at the high. But again, if we're back above this 57 level, I would still look for that long opportunity. Any questions? I'm going to go back to the chat in a second, then we'll look at some of the alts that I have on the chart. So I want to see that we're able to get back above 57. Right? I want to be back within this range and have this be a deviation. And then this, this as sort of this B setup with most of the volume down here. If we're able to trade back above that, I think that you have a lot of trap participants down into that low. The first move off of the low was really nice, right? So if we look at the first moves into the low, and I had the quant tower setup shared where I had my imbalances highlighted, but you see how aggressive this was sold into these lows. So all of the volume at the lows, able to pull this structure down, right? So strong moves into the lows. And then the final stab that we get, you get a lot of volume trapped below, right? So the final poke below, so back below these lows, you get a ton of volume down here. And if we look at how this sped up into that low, we see that, it's 37 million contracts traded, 11 million, 26 million, and the delta, the ratio of negative delta for this entire volume is essentially, I think you're looking at about, on the individual candle I was looking at, it was like 90% of it was out of the 15 million traded, about 14 million delta, so negative 14 million. But this rotation right here, you can just see how one-sided this is, and this is typically how the beginning of a bottom gets formed, right? You have that final very heavy push that does not offer any follow-through, right? Sellers throw everything they have at it, and then you have exhaustion, and the market is kind of easier to send back in the opposite direction. Let's go back to the chat real quick. Any questions for BTC? Funding right now, I have my funding on the other screen. Fundings are kind of normalized, right? So we're looking at funding that is, you're not looking at it, I am. It's 4 basis points predicted on Bybit, 4 basis points currently. BitMEX, it's at 1 basis point predicted and current. Binance, 2 basis points predicted and current. So it looks like there is more of a flush lately than we've seen. So in the last couple of days, in the last 3 days, we've seen more of a flush than we'd seen in this entire last 2 weeks. So that's a good thing. That is definitely a good thing. I don't know if we've had, I don't know how much leverage is in the system right now to work out, but generally speaking, the more liquidations that we see into a sell-off, the better, because what that means is a lot of that future sell pressure has been removed. So I don't know how many, we did have a decent amount of liquidations this morning. I'll look over at the chat. Let me go back to the chart real quick. Let me drag this over here so you guys can see it. So I have a different screen on the side. Just in terms of liquidations, in the last, I wish we had it by the last hour. I could look at it down here actually. So on aggregated liquidations, we had around, into this move into the low, we had around 184 million. So if you look at previous liquidation levels, right, you could get an idea of where you're sort of at, when you're sort of at extremes. That's not really an extreme where I'd say, okay, this is a level where I'm immediately going to expect mean reversion. So we might have, and I want to say that I expect, you don't just get a one and done out of here. A lot of structures, it's, 1, 2, 3 moves into the low. You have to invoke enough fear in people that they kind of just really start dumping out as viciously as possible, and then you get a reversal. So we haven't really seen a ton of liquidations, but and we'll look back at that funding. I was looking at Coin Analyze before when you weren't seeing it on the screen. So we see that fundings are more or less pretty neutral across the board. Open interest, all right, we'll go to my individual chart actually, that's a better idea. So we'll go to Coin Analyze, this, expand that a little bit. And we'll look at, for example, yesterday, one of the telltale signs was into this low. This was just a bad sign. I don't want to say it was telltale, like I was starting to get really bearish, but into this low, we were starting to see this absorption. So you have lower lows in price action, but you have higher lows on aggregated CVD. And right now, I just have this set to Bybit and BitMax. So some aggressive buying back here, and price was not doing anything but moving down. So never a good sign. Never a good sign. Especially when you don't have any kind of massive change in open interest. If it's staying relatively flat, let's say that you had this buying right here, right? This indication of aggressive buying, but you had a big drop off in open interest, then it could be shorts covering, but still getting, relatively absorbed. So either way, you're still seeing absorption. And when I say either way, I mean because there's a difference between new business and old business. Either way, when you do see that, how many times am I going to say either way? When you do see that one side is more aggressive and the market isn't moving as much, it still shows that even if that was aggression based on closing trades or opening trades, that that area is sticky, right? That area is pretty fortified. Aggregated spot CVD, haven't seen a massive change, right? So we still have aggregated spot CVD moving up with this trend, kind of in the same position that the trend is. So it's not doing too much to deviate from the course of price action, but spot CVD is a bit skewed to the upside period because there's only one type of seller. It's only a seller to close out. So keep that in consideration. Now funding though, as I said, the benefit of us continuing to make headway towards the highs and rather respecting this rising triangle, if we're able to keep this level and start rotating back upward, as long as funding, if we still see that funding is staying neutral, I'm more bullish because it just looks like there's less of a trap at the highs for longs. I become bearish when, on the higher time frames, and many times this is what is one of the reasons why I hedge or get into a swing short, when we're approaching structure, all right, and we have a higher increase in open interest. We're not above the structure yet, and we also have a drastically higher funding rate. So that's just showing that it's getting at that point, the market is getting very crowded a little too early, positioning on futures exchanges. And again, there's no new high yet, so it hasn't done anything in terms of price. So again, it's always a matter of what is the market doing? Okay, and then based on what it is doing, so we're seeing buyers get more aggressive, what should it be doing? Well, if the market is showing more buyers than sellers, why isn't it moving up more than the last period we're comparing it to where it actually had less buyers, right? So if we have a structure that has a high and then a lower high over here we had less buyers, over here we have more buyers, but we have a lower high, right? So in Delta, we see there's more buyers over here than there was over here, but price is having a tougher time in moving up. It's just a matter of effort versus results. For more effort, you're showing less results. So that's an indication of absorption and just a thicker area in terms of liquidity, right? In terms of what's being offered up there. Does anyone have any questions? And we'll look at some of the alts. Okay, let's see. 54.1K. Inch by inch, day by day. Bullish, bearish. Market is pregnant, both ends. Yeah. This is what happens, guys, during ranges. Ranges are when everyone looks for other information. So this is just the type of behavior you see from people in ranging markets too. It's you always, in a trending market, it's kind of very obvious. You have a good degree of momentum. Market is very one-sided. It's very clear someone is in control. You don't really have to do too much to figure it out, right? And you don't have to be too smart to make money. When the market is ranging, that is when the technicals no longer are giving you enough of an edge. If unless you are, again, you're a highly adept trader, even we have our limitations, but still, this is when everybody, no matter who you are, suddenly starts to paying attention to this development in the news and this on-chain data. It's because we're not seeing enough to give us a really firm. A lot of us do have firm hands, but we're not seeing enough to really say that it is a high conviction move to the upside or to the downside, because again, price is rather listless. So your mind starts wandering. That's just a verbose way of saying that. Thoughts on DeFi tokens? Okay, yep, take a look at those. Okay, all right, so you think we're topped out. So I don't think we're topped out. I think that in a market top, you'd have more volatility. I don't think we've had enough volatility yet to really indicate that. And I don't think these are the kind of conditions where you just roll over. It could be the first time that the market really just rolls over, and this is a top, because this is also the first time we have these types of institutional participants in, and the market is maybe a little bit more protected with regards to the downside. It's tough to say, right? It is tough to say. So I don't think that the top is in. I don't think the top is in. But what I do think, and I'm standing pretty firm on this, I do think that in terms of the bigger cycle, I do think that I do expect rather that the interim top is going to be put in pretty soon. So what I'm saying is that it's going to occur between now and the end of May, and I'm fairly convinced. Obviously you can't say that you have 100% conviction of anything, but I have a strong opinion that at some point before this period, we're going to experience the interim top and go through a more of a range, maybe a higher volatility move to the downside. Expect BTC to find a range in the summer, and then us pick up again Q4. So maybe something like this. Maybe we pop up to 70K, 75, and then have something like this where, maybe we come back down to 40K levels, put in more of a range, and then start to pick up again into Q4. Coinbase news is really positive, but how many people bought into the news, right? How many larger players are buying into this that knew well in advance? And you always sell the news, right? You always sell the news unless it's a surprise news catalyst, breaking news development. You always sell the news when something is. Markets are forward-looking. You can imagine a lot of people bought in advance of this to take advantage of these tailwinds. So after the Coinbase IPO, I'm not sure. I think that Bitcoin can pump into it, but I think that there is an egg timer on the. We're on the egg timer right now. We're on the clock, right? Shot clock is ticking, and that's why I don't want to take too much risk up here. But at the same token, while saying that, I don't want to limit myself either, because I think there's a good play above 60K. So, and if you look at the options market, it's pretty bullish further out. So that is something that I think might be a good leading indicator. But yeah, I think that's BTC. Let's take a look at some other things. So I think that a lot of DeFi pairs are overvalued, but I think that your larger caps, your blue chip DeFis, I think they're going to have a good summer again. I think that while BTC corrects, this could be a really good time. Or if Bitcoin goes through more of a range, like this could be completely fucking wrong, honestly. Bitcoin could go up to 100K and continue going up. I could be completely wrong. That goes without saying. Just my opinions, though. Where we kind of sit right now in terms of the level of froth, and it's also, though, it's important to remind ourselves we're in an echo chamber, so we might think this is very frothy for crypto, but this might be just beginning for retail, right? So I think that blue chip DeFi. So I'm looking for Wi-Fi, honestly, to put in another big move. This is something that I'm really focused on. All right, Ross, glad to have you in again, man. As always a pleasure. Wi-Fi is something I'm focused on. So some of the things that I'm looking at, obviously I'm in DOT again. So I'm in DOT. So we'll just go down the list, run through the gamut. Binance in this again. So I got out of this like a fucking dickhead, and cycled my profits into alpha and then lost a little bit and got back into this. As long as Binance, we have what has been after market ranges for this period of time. It's sort of the same idea behind Bitcoin's compression of volatility. When you have the market that's been ranging for this period of time, coming off of this trend, you got to look for an expansion through either the high or the low, and ultimately the high, if it's broken and accepts, and we see volume supportive of this, and we don't see any major signs to be concerned about, you expect that this expansion will, I'm going to stick with expression, express itself by continuing this trend. It might chop around a little while, right? You create some uncertainty, build up some of those shorts that maybe think that this is a swing failure, and then they're being trapped helps fuel this move up. All right, so this kind of chilling out up here doesn't really bother me. If anything, it's a really good level of defined risk, because if we're back below this daily level around 330, then I think, yeah, maybe you just start falling back within that sort of mean reverting ranging behavior within this range between around 330, and you could go all the way back down, right? We've seen alts do this plenty of times again, and plenty of times it doesn't make sense to start being overly biased and assume that this might do something completely different from here moving forward. Alts get, just like BTC, get over leveraged when you start reclaiming market structure to the downside after a pivotal break like this, where major contextual change. You got a lot of participants behind this that would probably puke if you start falling back below the structure. So this move can happen really quickly and then recover, but a lot of the times you fall back between here, you're going to cover from this point to this point, no matter what. Right? It might move very quickly and immediately recover, but either way, a lot of the times you're going to see that transpire. But as long as BNB holds this level, I think that, again, this is a play on the Coinbase IPO and repricing, and that this will rather be repriced based on the Coinbase IPO or Coinbase listing. DOT, I think it's the same sort of setup, right? DOT, SOL too, FTT, BNB, all of these right now have gone through over a month-long consolidation. I think the thing that I really like about DOT is DOT had a really tight consolidation. DOT broke through the downside, reclaimed, and is now sitting at the top side. So you have this fake out. I don't think that you get a fake out at the low and then a fake out at the high and then fall back within the range. So with DOT, you can get that, but with DOT, all I want to see is at the top side of this structure. DOT is an alt. It's going to be a little bit looser than something like BTC. All I want to see is that we maintain the top side of this structure. So ultimately, as long as DOT holds above, right around, we're looking at around 38 bucks. Not concerned. And I got filled in this move down, so I'm definitely biased. I'm definitely biased. If it starts coming down to 37, who knows what I'll be saying then. But I think that this is going to, again, express itself in a strong trending move. And I'm not going to be micromanaging this, because there's a lot of times when you'll have a move like this where you'll have, a very cleanly defined structure, clean highs, clean lows. You get a deviation at the low, which makes me even more bullish, like I said, because this is a trap down here. Now we're on the top side of this range, and maybe it chops around here for maybe another week. And you create a lot of uncertainty, and you create a lot of positioning in advance of what is expected of maybe a correction back down here. And again, those shorts covering is what helps this move get really violent really fast. Might not be fast right after this, but after we've consolidated and formed sort of a micro range at the top side of this, once you're breaking through the trigger of, let's say we're back above 45 from now, it could go from 45 to 55 pretty quickly. So DOT looks really attractive. FTT, same thing as BNB. With FTT, I think it's a little further along though. You're looking at, this is just a really strong trend, right? It hasn't done anything to really say that it's anything but a strong trend. You have a series of higher highs and higher lows. And now we're just looking at back around 40 to hold. Really nice grinding trend though. Right? This is, I wouldn't, honestly, this is one position that, again, I've been in and out of this, unfortunately. And what I mean, I've been trading it too many times when I should have just held from the beginning. I've captured a ton of upside because of it, but again, this is, if we're just looking at this from a trending standpoint, now expanding, put on the Bolligers that I had up for BTC. So you have this bottleneck. It looks like we're putting in an expansion now above structure, and you might see the resumption of a really strong trend takeoff from here. And if you remember, while this might look choppy over here, we had this sort of 1, 2, 3 structure that formed previously. It looked like it was having trouble and then ultimately the mistake is to think that this is one of these forming, right, a 3-drive structure, and then what happens is you have this massive expansion afterward. So I mean, not for nothing, I think FTT, I think FTX is this is a pure play on FTX's success, and I think FTT is going over $100, and that's just my opinion. And again, I am biased because I have a position. LTC is, a lot of people are going to say it's useless, but one thing it is good at doing, being self-fulfilling with regards to TA. So you have this really tight compression of volatility, this volatility funnel, right? Very nice retest. Looks like what is ultimately going to be a really nice expansion to the upside in the near future. You know, I don't want to overthink this. I know LTC is like kind of useless, but it is on payment platforms. And forget about these lows even, which is nice and clean. If you have something like this, you have this bottleneck that forms, a lot of times you're going to see a 1-for-1 move, right? So I expect that this is, I would say that, you know, we might chop around at this level, but we're breaking above 240 in the near future, 242, 245 in the near future. I am in a position again, so I am biased. I got filled on this move down. As long as this lower trend line is respected, so this diagonal support is respected now, you know, you want to continue to maintain what is the local progress of this trend. But as long as we're hanging out above what is ultimately around $200 to $210, I don't want to overthink this, because I think that LTC, regardless of it not being shit, right? I think it's over $300 in a bull market. LTC was one of the first. I love this because LTC is nostalgic. One of the first cryptos I used to actively trade all the time, and it was like, it actually had a lot of utility to me, because when I got involved in 2017, LTC it had enough liquidity and it was fast, right? So I didn't want to move Bitcoin around during times of peak volatility. You know, there is a risk to be taken by using LTC, right? You know, market could drop, but if Bitcoin looks stable, I knew that if I used LTC to send money from exchange to exchange, that it would do it the fastest, right? And this was only when there were a few pairs listed on something like Coinbase. So this will always have a special place in my heart. So I think that LTC, though, I think ultimately what we're going to see is that it's going to chop around a little bit, but you're going to have another strong move outside of this consolidation, similar to the one we had back here, right? So it'll chop around a little bit, right? It's in the heart of the bull market, right? I think that in the beginning, and this could pick up again. These continuation moves occur a lot more rapidly. But then there are periods where they chop around for a while, and I think what you have to fall back on is the technical, or the technicals. So for example, just to reiterate, go back to DOT, and we go back to something like BNB and FTT. You know, this is very clearly a strong trend, a long consolidation you would expect after a strong trend, very clearly defined contextual levels, and what is now, in my opinion, the market choosing a direction, right? Now, sometimes the market might spend a week up here. And if you look back at sort of something like Link, that's done this many times before, it's kind of chopped its way through the level and hung out there. And it allows you to really build up a certain amount of offside positioning to help the move. So I think that with these, for myself, I rather just ignore them. As long as they're above my level, I'll set my alerts, place my stops at the adequate distance, and I'll just walk away, because I think that 9 times out of 10 that it's better not paying attention to this and setting the structure as clear and validation. You know, the idea is this is a range, this is acceptance, right? This should act as support. Back within here, if we're back below the midpoint of this range, we're coming back at these lows, then yeah, I'll look for more ranging behavior to take place and maybe resort this one out. But as far as I'm concerned, as long as this low right here holds, so with BNB, as long as this 315, 310 level holds, I'm not worried, right? On a daily closing basis. So I'm not really worried about that. The last thing I want to do is have too tight of a stop, have one of those tests of liquidity that changes direction extremely quickly, right? Flushes the book, grabs that, and then runs. I would rather give this a higher time frame close as a stop. And that's a risk, right? Okay, XTZ, silver. Yeah, I wish it was still considered silver. Let's look at Sol. So here's a lesson on what you should be doing after major corrections, and I've said this many times before. And this is why I have this set up. So we'll just place this setup on real quick. So we'll go to today's correction in BTC. So we'll go to the low. We'll go to a new BTC chart so that I don't have to muddy up my drawings on this one. Okay, use that. It's just the closest one. All right, so where is the low of this sell-off? I believe that is right back here, right? That's what we're looking at. All right, so out of this low, let me fix that. Symbol name. So here's a great example of what you should look for in a bull market. What you want to look for when we're in really strong trending conditions. You want to look for after these sell-offs, right? In BTC, we do have a very correlated market, so it's going to drag a lot of pairs down with it still, regardless. After these sell-offs, what is out of the gates sprinting, right? What is making the strongest move out of the low? And what is performing the best within that sort of, I would say, that 1 to 4 hour period afterward. So what we're looking at right now, this is a bunch of blue chips, right? Major DeFi pairs, blue chips, some other pairs within here as well. And Sol is just crushing it outside of this. Cake is crushing it. Comp is crushing it. And I say crushing it in terms of, Sol's put in an 11% move, right? It's at 11% right now. These have put in a slightly higher move, corrected slightly since, but the idea is these are outperforming, right? These are performing exceptionally well after this correction. So Sol is showing strength. Oh, what the fuck is going on with that? Sorry about that. Excuse my language. Oh, that's my standard deviation band tool that I just added today. So I'll go over that since that's relatively new. Not new to that. It's not new to you guys. For some of you, you've been using that for a while, but I don't really like to use the VWAP tools too often on TradingView unless I've really looked into them, because some of them have, for some reason, give completely different readings than if I'm on something like Sierra or Quant Tower. But Sol is, again, when I see, so this is, just my opinion, when I see that something is consistently sprinting out of the gates, right, off the starting block the fastest out of these corrections, I kind of start thinking, is this something I want to trade anymore? Or is this something that I want to be more heavily invested in? So me personally, I will take these mean reversion opportunities in these pairs and I'll treat them more favorably no matter what, right? So I know that Sol performs exceptionally well. FTT has, BNB has, some of the other DeFi blue chips have. So I'll look for those during these dumps in BTC. I'll look for those opportunities and then for trades, right? But then in the long run, this is just showing continued strength. So I want to be heavily positioned or more heavily positioned in this in my investment portfolio. So if we just look this morning, this is the dump, the extent of the dump against BTC. And if you look at sort of the high and the low of this, you got a 13% move, and in BTC from yesterday's, we'll look at, for example, today. So from today's high to low, so from today's high to today's low, 5%. BTC is obviously not, I don't even need to do this because it's obvious. BTC has not nearly recovered, whereas Sol has just completely recovered the entire move. So clear indication of strength. What is an indication of strength if not the market actually ranging lower prior to the sell-off than where it is now, right? So like this is an area where the market was having trouble sorting itself out, and now you've corrected through that level rather than assuming continuation, or rather continuing, period to this low. Now you've actually just said fuck off to the entire consolidation that existed prior, right? So this is, by all means, this thing is just saying, hey, I can lift, right? I am capable of holding my own, and I am a strong trend not to be fucked with. So, excuse me. This is something that you have to keep your eyes on moving forward. SRM, same sort of thing with SRM as I think with BNB dot, where it's the same kind of clean structure in my opinion, right? So you have really long accumulation period. I think this is what Ray is going to go through. I've mentioned this before. Retesting prior high within market structure, Strong trending move, but bullish retest, previous high. This could be your next really tight consolidation, similar to how BNB formed, similar to how DOT formed, right? Formed a very tight consolidation. And now, most of the focus, I think, unless you're looking to add at the lows, right? If you're a breakout trader, if you're looking to get in this and you're not in now, and, where would I want to get involved? Well, I think that after you have this low that takes out these lows and now you're back recovered within the structure, I think a clean break of these daily highs leads to continuation. So very tight, clean consolidation. It's a little flip here, test of those lows, deviation, right? And now back sort of towards the top side of the structure. If you're back above that $8, $8.50 level, expect sort of 1-for-1 with this trending behavior. So this, I think, is a good play on FTT, though, as well. Something to consider. This is, I don't know what to make of sushi right now. So there was the unlock, right? So I think that can introduce an increase in selling pressure, but there was no major sell-off into that. So if anything, maybe all of the weak hands that could have sold have sold. But I don't know what to make of sushi. It's looking more limp than others, even though, I mean, if you look at this on from a weekly standpoint, it's this close to, I think, being back within what is the weekly higher high, higher low, higher high, and this is a lower low in the making. So, I mean, you need to fix that at least. I think you need to be back above 15, honestly, for this to really show that it has any strength in it. I know there's a ton of promise with this from an investing standpoint, yada, 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 but structure just is saying otherwise, right? And if anything, it looks like you have this little channel that's forming. So if you're getting something like this, and at least if you're starting to break back above 15 and you're outside of this, what looks like this little channel, then yeah, maybe this was your consolidation, spike into the low. And then if you're back above 16, if you're back above this high now, then I think it's very obvious, and that's actually a nice bottoming structure. But none of this has happened yet, right? Wi-Fi, something I'm very interested in. I think people have slept on Wi-Fi. And I think that because of this, it's the same effect maybe that XRP experienced, even though XRP is actually shit. Wi-Fi right now, slowly, steadily marching along, right? Already had massive moves, but I think it has a very clearly defined high now. Now, if you get this move above 44, I think this thing is going to have a big follow through. So this is something I'm definitely interested in. It's a nice clean level too. Regardless of whether or not you draw this from, let's say, for example, this is your weekly high level there. Weekly highest close at 43.465, and that's also the previous daily high before this deviation. So this general area right here, higher time frame resistance, no matter how you cut it, if you're above that weekly now, I don't expect that you reject again. I don't expect that this continues. You have this, you have this progress that has kind of been maintained to some degree, right? This is just an example actually of how subjective trend lines are. Look at this, just fitting the bias. But the trend lines are kind of just saying what we could say, period, by just looking at this, is that this is more or less, can't say that actually, because you're either doing it or you're not, making a series of higher highs and higher lows. So this is a slightly lower low, it looks like. Let's see. Slightly, but I don't know, that's negligible. I think that this is going to have a big breakout move. Okay, XTZ has done well over the last few days, but it'll carry on. I don't know. XTZ is kind of like, I always thought it was like Link's weaker brother in terms of structure. We'll go to, I made this list of calculated USD charts because it shows a really long history. Let's see, XTZ. XTZ is, I don't know if this has been dormant for quite some time, put in a strong move, but this is during a time when all scams are pumping. So scams pump the hardest. Not to say XTZ is, but I think we're at the point where if you're looking at something that hasn't moved and now it's just put in a move, it's not the same as DeFi pairs that have been strong for as long as they have, right? Now this is kind of the pump phase, kind of cycle through what hasn't moved already and let's throw some money at it if it has a good setup. I don't think that this really has a good setup, right? We can't really hinge on the idea that we're now making a higher high on the weekly because it hasn't really meant too much post-break previously. So if we look back at highs, it hasn't really done much. So this high over here, it's not like we could really say, oh, we're going to put it all on the line at $5, right? Support should act, resistance should act as support, or better yet, even somewhere between 536 down to 470. I don't think so. I think that this just retraces the entire move. And it might not do that today, tomorrow, but I think ultimately you're back. I don't think this is sustained. I appreciate that, YS. I appreciate that. Well, I've been trading now for 14 years, so I hope that this stream is decent. I've only been trading crypto for 4 years now, but I appreciate that. Thank you. So one thing I was going over with some of the BlockRoots members earlier this morning is a tool that I pulled this up on the chart. I'll look at Matic in a second. I did just look at XTZ, so I'm sure there's a little bit of a lag. One of the things that I use constantly is VWAP, right? So VWAP is where, the market is based on, that sounded stupid, depending on what setting it is, it's where most of the risk has been allocated over that time period. So traditional markets, a lot of intraday traders, a lot of prop guys are going to be using something like a daily VWAP. Portfolio managers will use a VWAP too, right? It's a good area for liquidity, fair value level. But VWAP, this tool right here, this is the VWAP Standard Deviation Bands version 2 modified version. This is based on the daily VWAP, right? So if I'm looking at a weekly VWAP, a monthly VWAP, a quarterly VWAP, I'm seeing where risk was put on over time, right? So the idea being, I'll take this off and put the quarterly VWAP on. So if we put BTC's quarterly VWAP on, so let's put that on real quick. All right, so let's put the monthly on. Monthly VWAP on. So April just reset, but you can see last month's VWAP, right? The entirety of the last couple months we've been maintaining, for the most part, the top side, right? So bulls in control on the higher time frame, but that's so obvious. You're looking at the trend. It's been an uptrend this entire time. So this month opening up and spending a good amount of time below where most of the volume has actually come in. So this goes back to this range up here where actually most of the volume is at the highs, and it is a range that is unfavorable right now. There's nothing bullish about this range locally because right now sellers are in control, right? Most of the volume came in at the highs and it's rolling because of that, right? The volume was not able to carry price further up, right? So for that activity, price was not able to follow through. So this is a higher time frame VWAP, right? You could put on a weekly VWAP and see sort of how the risk has been allocated across, a rolling weekly basis. I put on a lot of the times an anchored VWAP, right? So for example, just a little lesson on VWAPs. I will put on an anchor VWAP. So let's say, for example, let's use this low, right? So we'll talk about today's break of this level within market structure. So right around 57.5. So let's put an anchored VWAP on right around there. So we'll put an anchored VWAP on from, this is April, today is the 7th, and that is hour 7. Okay, so, excuse me, that is not hour 7, that is hour right around 10. So just from that break point. So what I'm doing is anchoring a VWAP from the point that market structure broke to the downside right here. So what I'm seeing now, right, is post that period where all of the risk has been put on. And you're going to see that this is very close to where a lot of times will be. This is, again, I noticed a mess up before when I was on XO. You'll see a lot of times the VWAP is where the point of control or near where the point of control is. So you can see that on the Coinbase chart where most of the volume is at the low, it's at the low. this is sometimes such a negligible difference in terms of what makes a point of control in the chart. It could just be based on your tick settings for this distribution, because as you can see, right, the difference between this point of control and what ultimately could have been the point of control down here, they're both the same sort of in terms of being a high volume node, right? These are almost exactly the same, but because it's so fine tuned right now and that tick setting is really high, it's going to show you which one is where most of the volume came in. But either way, most of the volume is now sitting above where we are. So sellers in control. If we're starting to trade back above this VWAP, we could start to make an argument for, hey, most of the volume that's come in after this break is now below us, and buyers are in a better position, right? So the VWAP that I was featuring before is standard deviation band VWAP. And I think that this is good for, you could use this for BTC, right? I like to just use a VWAP without standard deviation bands, but I think that this tool makes it useful, right? Excuse me, it sounded fucking stupid. It is very useful because of these standard deviation bands. If you're trading something like DOT on the intraday, if you're trading something like any one of these, liquid DeFi pairs that you could intraday trade, when you are 3 to 4 standard deviations away from the VWAP, a lot of the times you're going to see the market mean revert, right? So whether the market is coming back after putting in a strong move to the upside, right? So putting in a strong move to the upside up here, and you'll see those candles highlighted red, putting in a strong move to the upside here, or, we're putting in really firm moves to the downside, right? And you can see this is separated by session. But the idea is the market has gotten very extended from where that risk has been put on for the day, and that normally, this might be a period where sellers are getting exhausted, right? Where buyers have been stopped out, right? Where we're far enough away from that where we could expect some sort of mean reversion back to where, again, that fair value for the day or that VWAP is, right? Fair value, VWAP, you're going to hear me use those interchangeably. Just, again, where most of the risk was put on. So I think this is a good tool to use, and I constantly try to feature good tools. You won't see me really keep this on too often, right? If I'm trading on the off chance that I'm really intraday trading alts, a tool like I said, a tool like this can be very useful. Does anyone have any questions about any other charts? I said I'd look over Matic. Okay, let's take a look at this. See if this is on this so I can get a bigger chart. I think it is. No, it's not. All right, so let's go back to that. I mean, this is looks like it was stuck for the last 3 weeks on a closing basis within this range on the weekly, right? So now putting in another move towards this low on the daily, I mean, that's so obvious, right? This, I don't know, I would say that again, I don't know anything about Matic, right? There's sometimes when someone might pull up a chart like this, it looks like shit, but it's got something coming down the pipeline I'm unaware of, and pumps another 100% form here, and it doesn't matter that it lost structure. But in terms of structure alone, I mean, I don't like the way that this is shaping up. You had this consolidation for the last week, right? Now it's had this what looks like highly volatile push out of this consolidation, still into this daily low that we've had. But is this your attempt at is this your lower high? I mean, maybe not, right? Maybe this just goes on to develop a range within 45 and around 30. But this is beyond that. It's not much you can go off of, right? I mean, if you're in Matic, what level wouldn't you want to see? I think it's around 30, right? Just look at how this structure has transpired. Higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low. Big push, big imbalance move. Once you start falling back within these gaps, so within these moves that are really not supported by too much volume, there's not much in them, you tend to kind of cover the gap. So as you can see, we came back down to this consolidation, which leaves the last gap open from 30 back down to 20. So 20, 30 it has to hold, in my opinion. But CRV, yeah, I think did I put that on here? Yeah, I did. CRV, I think that this kind of looks like a cup and handle, right? Cup and handle is a bottoming structure. It's not just a meme. These tend to work out pretty well. If we look at this on the weekly, see where we're doing business. This was the week consolidation, right? 2-week consolidation before a major breakdown, long accumulation period. Not for nothing. in CRV, the accumulation period is actually pretty attractive too, because you have what is highly volatile move into the low, volatility really drops off, your range for months, really strong trending move back in the structure, and now you have what looks like the handle on the cup, right? And this neckline is your green light. So this is something that I'm looking to get long on that break. I don't want to assume that it's going to come, because what can happen is, you could consistently get long in a resistance thinking it's coming. And the problem is, it's not a problem if someone is able to stop you from looking at your computer screen, right? This is what I say sometimes. Like, it's not a problem if you're in and you step away for a week, because it still might resolve up here either way. It's a problem when you get involved here thinking it's breaking here, and then it moves sideways before finally breaking for the next month. So what's the likelihood you're going to hold on to that, right? Are you going to leave it on, put a stop below one of these lows, or do you see the structure forming? You see clearly this is the major rejection you have to get through. 350 is the the trigger point. And now if you're above here, even if you're at 4, you're looking for a pullback right at that, the first pullback you get. So let's say that, for example, CRV occurs like this, right? CRV, let's put in a fake trending leg. So ghost pattern, bars pattern, excuse me. This is our trending leg. Let's say it does this from here. Right, what I would look at is if CRV puts in a near vertical move, what I like to do is, this is when I use a fib, from the neck to the high of that vertical move, look to get involved between the 382 and the 618. So place my bids there. Right, if we hit there and start leaving that, I might just chase this up. But that is the confirmation, the break of that level, not before, not just because it looks like a cup and handle. So, yeah. But how far are we into this right now? Let's see. We are an hour and 16 minutes. I'll look at Link and XRP, and that's I think that'll cover it. Let's see. Link. Let me go all the way back. Link has been a pretty boring trending structure, right? On the low time frames, it seems to chop a lot, but the higher time frames, it's definitely put in the work. I think that Link put in a really strong move earlier, as I said a while ago. Put in such a strong move earlier that it kind of fell off the radar in terms of excitement, right? For so long, Link Marines, Link Marines, Link Marines, right? Putting in big moves. But this has been, it's quite extended already. So I think that as far as Link goes, what we've seen with Link is that it does tend to take some time to chop around. As long as we maintain these previous levels, right? So now what is the most recent level is right around 20. I wouldn't want to overthink this, right? I think that Link is going to consistently be something strong. It's not, it's kind of agnostic in terms of not BTC, not ETH. The Link is kind of reminds me of as if it's the only thing that trades like an equity in crypto, right? Not as exciting anymore. Strong trend though over time, strong secular trend, respecting higher time frame levels. Maybe I called it an equity because it's boring now, but it's as long as Link holds this previous structure that it's already been retested now. So if we're looking at that $20 level, you could probably refine it and say, hey, you don't want to lose 24 at this point, right? We're clearly within a range. And on the same token, what has worked well for Link in the past? Well, acceptance outside of this range above 35 likely leads to a pretty decent continuation move. But this is the range that you're in right now. So if you're below 24, not so good, even though you technically, $20 is your previous range high. But what we've seen with Link previously is that it's actually chopped around for a really long time and almost grinded its way up rather than really blowing through any major levels recently. So XRP, and then Sigma, I'll look at Noya, and then I'll wrap it up because no one said anything else, and that's that. XRP. XRP, I'm not bullish on. I think that XRP was, you know, and I've said this for a long time. The thing about XRP is like you have people now on Twitter that are talking about XRP as if they haven't been publicly buying this at every high and every low. You know, what's their cost basis right now? What's the average cost basis of someone that's been buying XRP right now? What they get out of this trade? You know, they get 100% move. Like you could have had that 10 times over with so many other things while waiting for this. So, you know, I think XRP, like all things though, deserves the respect that the technicals, I think, command. And I think that, you know, this high, clearly, these levels back here around 62, that they've served as a pretty important turning point up to this point. So now, moving forward, you know, this, the top side of this structure, hey, you know, this, as long as this holds, maybe we do see continuation with XRP. But if you ask me, what do I think is going to occur with XRP? I think XRP is going to probably put in another pop upward, but end up coming back down to where it came from. What XRP is an example of is when the market is underexposed to something, pretty much forcefully, because a lot of people got out of XRP because exchanges delisted it. So there was actually a lot of sidelined interest in XRP from that. And from people that maybe normally would have traded it, right? So this move was kind of a move where it wasn't a short squeeze, but it was a short squeeze because it might not have been positionally a short squeeze based on people actually physically shorting it, but it was short in the sense that there were not as many people in it anymore. So there are more buyers on the sideline, right? And when you have more buyers in something already, there are more sellers in the market. When you have more people that are on the, you know, clearly when a lot of people sell, it leaves more future buyers, right? All right, and then Noya, and that's it, because I said I was cutting it off there, and unfortunately at some point you got to call it. So right away you see this very clean, I don't know if it's very clean, but it looks like a, what do you call that, some kind of rising wedge. I'm not a patterns guy, so forgive me. These, I mean, in my experience, how do these normally resolve? I think these are good for something like this, right? I don't know. I don't know anything about it. Let's look at Noya real quick, because sometimes I have no idea what I'm looking at. Syntropy. 282 million. Circulating supply is about half of what is actually out. What actually exists. Not that high of trading volume. I mean, this is great to look at without the... Okay, so the one thing that gets me in trouble, as I said this many times before, is that with a technical trading background, and when I say technical, I don't trade off of the TA that... I don't like the term TA, trading by TA. Right? My trading is based on order flow, profile, based on where actual activity came into the market, not just where structure was or where moving average is. But there is something to be said for patterns that do occur across asset classes, across stocks, across bonds, across cryptocurrencies, big higher time frame 3 drive structures, right? How they typically resolve. And more often than not, these lead to corrections, right? This kind of blow off top that you have, it's not exactly a blow off top, but I don't think that I would expect too much more out of this. Maybe one more pop, like I said, because of, it looks like we have this tightening of volatility towards the high. So we put the log chart back on, right? But in terms of structure, what you're seeing, the story is also big move up, long consolidation, move up that's smaller though, right? So smaller than, this is like half the size of that one. Smaller consolidation, smaller move up, right? About half the size of that one. And then a smaller consolidation. And what this is showing you is that a lot of the times this precedes sort of a blow off top. The market is speeding up. This is what a market looks like when it's turning into a parabola, right? It goes from this to this to this to this, even tighter and tighter on the way up until finally it has nothing left below it, and the parabola blows off. And since these structures, each one is less significant than the prior, there's not much that stands in the way of it. So it has probably a last push ahead of it, but then you get that sort of cascading liquidation that follows. You know, if that doesn't come, let's say that it kind of comes a little bit more docile from this point moving forward and just slowly comes back down to the structure. Excuse me, that's not what I want to use. These daily levels, right? Can't just write them off. So down here, right around 50, this is right around 56. And then the prior structure is right around 30. So, you know, still, it would be great if, let's say you don't have that blow off, right? Or even if you do, if this structure maintains, then maybe you look for a range to develop. But purely, if honestly, this is not the smartest thing to do. Just trying to predict what this does. I think that this does something like this in the near future, and then corrects, and then forms some type of range back within here. If I was looking at this right now, I don't know if I would be that interested in it. But that covers it, guys. It has been a good stream. Take one more look at BTC, see where we're sitting. So it looks like we're putting in another move back towards that low. I don't like the way this looks right now. You want to see that you're maintaining where most of the risk is being put on if you're building a base even. So the fact that we're favoring these lows, not the best situation. It would be better, you know, let's say that we end up doing something like this. If we trade below and then we claim these lows again, that's fine. We put in some type of tail down here. But the way it sits right now, it doesn't look promising in the short term, put it that way. I wouldn't want to be long right from this point, thinking that it's going to bottom. I'd rather be long from either up here to here, or from either here back up to here. But this is kind of in the middle of where most of this lower area is being developed. And yeah, period, in terms of the local range that we were within before we just broke down, a move back above yesterday's low I think sets you back up for just sort of that same rotational range behavior that we were in prior. I don't want to say anything big comes until, you know, it's going to sound silly, until 60K goes, you know, which sounds kind of like, oh, you're obviously making a case for like when it moves up, but that's just what we're dealing with right now. It's just very obvious that this is the most important level on this chart. Meanwhile, the lows have been more dynamic, right? But the highs have been static. So, all right, guys, everyone have a fantastic evening. I will talk to you soon. On behalf of myself, my partner Josh Rager, and our partners at Phemex, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to have another stream on Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, have a fantastic day.